I'm Lucas, a 24-year-old college student from Denver. I decided to take a solo road trip through the Rocky Mountains to clear my mind after a tough semester. My plan was simple: drive, camp, and enjoy the serenity of nature. Little did I know, this trip would take a turn that I'd never forget. It was the third day of my journey when my car broke down. I was deep in the mountains, far from any town or help. The engine sputtered and died, and when I tried to restart it, nothing happened. I checked my phone, but of course, there was no signal. I remembered seeing a cabin a few miles back and decided to walk there, hoping to find some help. The hike to the cabin took longer than I expected. By the time I arrived, the sun was beginning to set. The cabin looked old but well maintained. I knocked on the door, and after a few moments, an elderly man opened it. He had a kind face, though something about his eyes unsettled me. "Hi, I'm Lucas," I began. "My car broke down a few miles back. Do you have a phone I could use to call for help?" The man introduced himself as Joe. He smiled and said, "I don't have a phone, but why don't you come inside and have some dinner? We can figure something out afterward." Hesitant, but hungry and tired, I agreed. The inside of the cabin was cozy, filled with the smell of a hearty stew. Joe asked me all sorts of questions while we ate. "Where are you headed, Lucas?" he asked. "I'm just exploring the Rockies," I replied. Needed a break from college stress. Joe nodded, but his questions grew more personal. "Do you have family? Friends know you're out here?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Yeah, my parents and a few friends know my route," I lied, hoping it would deter any ill intentions he might have. As we continued eating, Joe's demeanor shifted. He seemed almost too interested in my answers, leaning in with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Do you often travel alone?" he asked. I forced a laugh, trying to keep things light. "Not usually, but it's nice to get some alone time." Joe nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Alone time can be good, but it can also be dangerous. My instincts were screaming at me now. I excused myself, saying I needed to check on my car again before it got too dark. Joe's expression darkened, but he didn't stop me. As soon as I was out of sight, I ran. I didn't stop to look back until I was sure I was far enough away. I spent the night in the woods, too afraid to go back to the road until daylight. The next morning, I made my way to a main road and flagged down a passing car. I told the driver everything, and he agreed to take me to the nearest town. From there, I contacted the police. A few days later, I got a call from the authorities. They thanked me for my tip. It turned out Joe had a history of luring travelers into his home and holding them captive. They had been looking for him for a long time. I shuddered, realizing how close I had come to a terrible fate. That road trip was supposed to be a peaceful escape, but it ended up being a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in unexpected places. I learned to always trust my instincts and to be cautious, even in seemingly safe situations. I was driving through the Arizona desert, heading to visit my old college friend in California. It was a long drive, and the barren landscape stretched endlessly on both sides of the highway. The sun was setting, casting an orange hue over the horizon. I had been driving for hours and needed a break. As I approached a bend, I saw a man standing by the side of the road with his thumb out. He looked harmless enough, so I decided to stop and give him a ride. "Hey, need a lift?" I asked as I rolled down the window. "Yeah, thanks, man. My car broke down a few miles back," he said, climbing in. "Name's John." "Nice to meet you, John." "I'm Mason," I replied, trying to sound casual. We made small talk for a while, mostly about the weather and the landscape. But then John started asking more personal questions. "So Mason, where are you headed?" he asked. "California. Visiting an old friend," I said. "Really? Do you travel alone often?" His tone made me uneasy. "Sometimes. Why do you ask? I glanced at him, trying to read his expression. Just curious, he shrugged, but there was something in his eyes that made me nervous. I noticed a knife handle protruding from his backpack. My heart rate quickened. That's a big knife you've got there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, that? It's for protection. You never know who you might run into out here, he replied with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. I tried to stay calm, but I was on high alert. Where exactly did your car break down? I asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from the knife. About 10 miles back. Funny thing, no one else stopped, he said, his tone becoming more sinister. Why did you stop, Mason? My mind raced. I just wanted to help. You looked like you needed it. I lied, feeling a knot in my stomach. We drove in silence for a few more miles until I saw a gas station up ahead. I need to use the restroom. Do you mind if we stop for a minute? I asked, trying to sound casual. Sure, go ahead, John said, his eyes narrowing slightly. I pulled into the gas station and quickly got out of the car, heading straight for the restroom. Inside, I found the clerk and whispered, "There's a man in my car with a knife. Can you call the police?" The clerk's eyes widened, but he nodded and reached for the phone. I stayed in the restroom, my heart pounding, waiting for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I heard sirens approaching. I peeked out and saw the police arrive. They approached my car, and I saw them pulling John out. They handcuffed him and searched his backpack, finding the knife and other suspicious items. One of the officers approached me. "You did the right thing by alerting us," he said. "This man is wanted for several crimes. Your quick thinking probably saved your life." I thanked the officer, feeling a mix of relief and lingering fear. I got back into my car and continued my journey, my hands still shaking. As I drove away, I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to danger. The desert felt even more desolate, and the road ahead seemed longer than ever. I made it to California safely, but the encounter with John haunted me. Every time I drove alone, I couldn't help but remember that day in the Arizona desert. It was a stark reminder that sometimes helping a stranger can lead to a terrifying situation. My name is Ethan, and I'm 28 years old. After spending years cooped up in a monotonous office job, I finally decided to take a break and drive across the Midwest. I wanted to clear my head, see new places, and find some inspiration for my photography hobby. Little did I know, this trip would turn into a nightmare. It was the 5th day of my journey. I had been driving for hours, lost in thought, with the vast, open plains stretching endlessly on either side. The scenery was beautiful but monotonous, and I was getting tired. I decided to pull into a rest area to stretch my legs and get some fresh air. The rest area was nearly empty, save for a couple of parked trucks and a single beat-up car. I parked my car, got out, and started walking around. The cool breeze felt good on my face, and I took a few deep breaths, trying to shake off the weariness. As I walked, I noticed a disheveled man sitting on a bench near the restrooms. He had messy hair, dirty clothes, and an unsettling look in his eyes. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him, but I soon realized he was watching me closely. I tried to ignore him and continued my walk, but the feeling of being watched made me uneasy. I was about to head back to my car when the man stood up and started walking toward me. He moved quickly with an aggressive posture. My heart began to race as he got closer. "Hey, you," he called out, his voice rough and demanding. "Can you give me a ride?" His sudden approach and the intensity in his eyes put me on edge. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going that way," I lied, trying to sound calm. He didn't seem to buy it. "Come on, just a few miles up the road," he insisted, stepping closer. "I really need a ride." Something about him felt very wrong. I took a step back, trying to keep some distance. "I really can't. I'm in a hurry," I said, my voice shaking slightly. His expression changed, becoming more menacing. "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "You're not in a hurry. You have time." My mind was racing, trying to think of a way to get out of this situation. "I'm sorry," I repeated, more firmly this time. "I can't help you." He took another step closer, and I noticed something glinting in his hand. A knife. Panic surged through me, and I turned and bolted back to my car. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys for a second, and finally managed to unlock the door. I jumped in, slammed the door shut, and locked it just as the man reached the car. He pounded on the window, his face twisted with anger. "Open the door," he shouted, brandishing the knife. "Open it now." Terrified, I started the engine and floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched as I sped out of the rest area, leaving the man behind. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him standing there, still holding the knife, watching me drive away. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I kept driving, not daring to slow down until I was far away from that rest area. When I finally felt safe enough to stop, I pulled over at a gas station and called the police. I reported the incident, describing the man and what had happened. The dispatcher assured me they would send someone to check it out and advised me to stay safe and avoid picking up strangers. A few days later, I received a call from the police. They had apprehended the man. He had a history of violent assaults and was wanted in several states. They thanked me for reporting him, saying my call had helped prevent further incidents. The whole experience left me shaken. My road trip, which was supposed to be a peaceful escape, turned into a stark reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. I learned to trust my instincts and stay cautious, even in seemingly safe situations. That drive through the Midwest will always haunt me, a reminder of the danger that can lurk in unexpected places.